this massive missile attack, this barrage, then the actual what do you want to call it? Invasion into Israel, where over 260 people were murdered at a music festival. You had women kidnapped, children kidnapped. You haven't seen that since World War II. And then you had IDF soldiers killed. They weren't able to respond because they were overwhelmed and taken prisoner. This is a massive, massive failure, an incredible failure of the intelligence community in Israel. How in the world does this happen?
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me back. Yeah, it happens because 10 things go right for the Hamas side and on that side of the terrorist side, and then 10 things go wrong on the Israeli side from a classic operation. And none of those linchpins were pulled out. What I mean by that is it's during a holiday. There was a holiday going on. Israel never thought that this would happen. The enemy wouldn't attack. And Israel doesn't ever thought that the enemy had this kind of capability. There's going to be investigations as to what happened and with regard to where they got the capability to do this. We haven't seen rockets fired from the Gaza Strip in over 2 years. They thought they had that under control because of that blockade. They had enough, they were able to mass enough people, men at the border. You know, they only used 1,000 troops here from a straight military, conflict. Israel would roll over 1,000 people attacking. But what they did was they attacked civilians, which just really didn't make it a military, kind of confrontation. It made it more of a terrorist operation. So, so many things went wrong on Israel's side. So many things went right on Hamas side. And that's where we have the result. And now it's on. But I'll tell you this: I think Hamas is dead people walking. I don't see them surviving any of this. I think the Israelis have activated 100,000 troops. We're going to see an incredible amount of destruction taking place in the Gaza Strip.
We'll get to that in a moment, Major. Let's take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
The number of missiles, which there isn't an official count of that I've seen yet, that were able to be launched. The sources state that these missiles were not shipped in, but rather were assembled in the Gaza Strip. That means a tremendous amount of materials was able to get in, whether that's from the Mediterranean or up through the Sinai via Egypt, if you will, or in other ways.
Yeah,
that all missed Israeli intelligence. That would tell me that multiple people were asleep at the switch. If you just said that they wouldn't have expected an attack on a Jewish holiday, it was a holiday called Simchas Torah yesterday, the other day, over the weekend. That is a lot of asleep at the switch, not only for a day, but for months, if not years. No?
Yeah, so here's the kind of rockets that were used. They were short-range rockets, and they were the kind that they deploy in mass that overwhelm the Israelis' Iron Dome system. So that's number one. So those rockets are small, and they have small components to them, and that's why they were easily able to be smuggled into the country and then reassembled later. So, this was well planned, took place. Likely they started planning this 18 months ago. And maybe pinpointed it to the 1973 anniversary as well, 50 years to the date. That's always symbolic for these kinds of terrorist organizations. But yeah, well planned, and how it slips through is because things don't look like rockets given the size of the kind that they used here. They were deployed so close, they got them so close to that border there. By the time we're in the air, the Iron Dome system couldn't respond. And then, like any air defense platform, it can be overwhelmed.
This is about Iron Dome. So this means that Hamas has been able to study how the dome has been utilized, which is basically this missile system that shoots down Hamas rockets or Hezbollah rockets before they're able to land. They're able to study and figure out where the damage point is. They figured they learned that you can overwhelm this. When did that become part of what they were able to ascertain?
Well, it's just a math equation. If there's only X amount of pod rockets that are inside an Iron Dome system. Iron Dome works because it goes after areas of rockets, assuming coming in in the same space, blows up in space, and then takes out, let's say 10 to 15 rockets at one time before they land. But if you launch, 3,000 of them, or you launch, in the thousands of them, that's just too difficult for you in order to be defending against, especially if they come in waves, which is what they did there as well. Israel always knew that Iron Dome could be overwhelmed. It gets down to somewhat of a false sense of security, and then you lay over the fact that these were shorter range from a reaction perspective, they flew at a lower altitude. All the things that made it easier. It's a gap, lack of creativity. Same things that happened to the United States, 22 years ago in 9/11, when we thought we were safe and we never thought an enemy could use our airlines against us, and then didn't catch all of the indicators that this was happening. It's the same thing. Israel's going to go back and study all the things that they should have picked up beforehand. They'll never make that mistake again.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. We talk about the Israeli military, Israeli intelligence missing this. And certainly there's a political reality that now exists for Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. Was the United States in any way aware of this attack? Was there anything that was going on in previous reporting that you have seen that would be able to be tied to what it is we saw over the weekend, what is continuing?
I don't think so. I've not seen anything that we've reported on, and I would say that it would have been difficult for us to, and that's because this kind of attack would have fallen below a U.S. radar with regard to what connecting all the dots. Once again, they're not. They would have never thought, just like the Israelis, that they could have smuggled in those kind of smaller rockets. Lack of creativity. Didn't think they were going to use those kind of rockets. They didn't see any kind of massing at the border. They did understand that there was a training exercise that they had set up, and they had trained on at some level for this. But that happens all the time. You see those, you go back to the late '90s, those videos of the guys with AK-47s jumping around on the monkey bars. I mean, so that's all part of their propaganda for their people. But they never connected the dot and in terms of where they attacked. And